John McMullen, of course. You can read all of his stuff at 973ESPN.com. The Eagles. Some Eagles news out there, according to New Jersey Advance Media. Get John's take on this as well. Is they're reporting that basically the Eagles have their sights and hopes set on one Kenny Stills, the wide receiver from the Miami Dolphins, if the Dolphins, in fact, let him go, John. So, one, what are the chances the Dolphins will let him go? Because, to me, he's a pretty young free agent. He getting out of that deal, he's typically the free agents are a little bit older. He's only like 24 years old. For number one, do you think the Dolphins let him walk? And number two, does he fit what the Eagles need?
I think he does fit, and I think that's where that report comes from. I think it's more intimation than anything else. If you look at what the Eagles want, and that's what I've said with Deshaun Jackson, people put two and two together there, but that's not the type of player you want at this particular time in the Eagles, and particularly Carson Wentz's growth. You want somebody coming off that first NFL contract that is on the verge of hitting the prime of his career, and Stills fits that. He's a deep threat, but he's not good enough to where you're going to look at the Dolphins and say they're going to move mountains to keep him, especially when you think about Jarvis Landry's there, and he's really their top-tier receiver. So he's a complimentary guy, but he fits what the Eagles need, and that's a legitimate deep threat who can catch the football, get over the top, and that would certainly help them. There's no question about it, and they have to improve that position. We've talked about it time and time again, whether it's the draft, free agency, or both. And the Eagles certainly know that. Nobody knows that. The Eagles have known since training camp and of last season that they needed significant help at that position. And they're going to go out and add bodies this offseason. There's no question about that.
Yeah, last year, John, they went the veteran route. They went Chris Givens and Ruben Randall. That didn't work. So does your intuition say, look, we can't go with the duct tape and Band-Aids. We got to try to get somebody that can make more of an impact?
Yeah, I think they understand that. And last year, the hope, I think there was a greater hope that maybe Nelson Aguilar's rookie season was a bit of an anomaly, and that he would kind of figure it out and turn into a legitimate NFL receiver. I think after you see the same movie again, I think you start to realize we can't go into another off season and assume this guy's going to get better. We got to get help, and hopefully he gets better, but you just simply can't count on it. So there's no more, as you mentioned, Band-Aids, the Ruben Randalls of the world, the Chris Givens, who didn't even make the football team. You got to do better than that.
Talk with John McMullen here, and a report from NJ Advance Media says the Eagles will pursue Kenny Stills. And as John, you kind of indicated, you're putting the dots together there. They need a game-breaking guy. He had 9 touchdowns last year, about 17 yards a catch, but by no means is he that guy who's going to get you, 90 catches for 1,200 yards. This guy's never even had 1,000 yards, so they would have to do more than just that, right? Or do you think that they think that just by getting that stretch the field kind of guy, that will open and help out the guys they currently have?
Well, I think if you're able to pull something like that off, your hope is that he eventually does turn into an 80, 90 catch type of guy. If he has the opportunity to get more targets, which he would have here. If you think about his early career in New Orleans and then Miami, again, there were guys ahead of him. And certainly when you have a Jarvis Landry, he's going to get the majority of the targets. So I think the hope is if you sign a young kid like that, as I said, ready to hit his prime in his career, that he will take the next step. And guys will get better. Certainly Jordan Matthews would get better. And all of a sudden, if that domino falls, and you have him in his comfortable slot position, not seeing double teams, all of a sudden he becomes a better player, and then who knows what happens from there. But, yeah, I think they do want to add multiple bodies, but I think if you sign somebody like Stills, that takes sort of wide receiver off the table when you're talking about the first-round draft choice. But certainly they'd want to add bodies later in the draft.
John, would you expect him to be a popular name if he does hit the market?
Yes, very popular because of his age. And that's the way NFL people think. You want guys off their first NFL contracts. That's what free agency is about. It's not about the 30-year-old guys unless you're a Super Bowl contender and you need that last piece to put you over the top. Everybody wants the guys coming off that first rookie contract and ready to go on their second contract, and they look for people that have an upside and that could perform at a higher level than they have in the past. And I think Kenny Stills fits all those definitions.
John, we all know that the Eagles will need to create more cap room before March, but will they have the ammunition to get into maybe a bidding war if they have to?
Well, I always say never worry about the contract stuff with Howie Roseman. That's his strength, and he will create space that if they want a player, they can get him. And if they want to get in the business. And for all you want to say about the Eagles over the years, right decision, wrong decision in free agency, generally when they get somebody in that building in South Philadelphia that they want, they don't leave that building without signing a contract. And right now, as you compare the Eagles to a lot of teams, they don't have a ton of cap space, but we know Ryan Matthews is going to be gone. That's $4 million. There's a potential that Connor Barwin's gone. That's near $8 million. Leotis McKelvin, $3.2 million. So they could create a lot of cap space awful quickly.
Why did the Saints, if we talk about Stills, and he started with New Orleans, so why did the Saints let him leave New Orleans? Because he appears to be a good wideout.
Yeah, it was a trade, so it wasn't like they were saying, we have no confidence. But New Orleans, I'll tell you, with Drew Brees, look, even though they've had hiccups over the past number of years, they're not nearly as good as they have been. They've always been able to throw the football. I mean, Drew Brees, you can almost guarantee 5,000 yards per season. They're always in the top three passing the football in the NFL, so it was a position of strength. And the Dolphins, on the other hand, were desperate for a deep threat after sort of Mike Wallace didn't work out down there. So I think it worked for both teams. I think he performed pretty well with the Dolphins, who, if you look at Ryan Tannehill, he's had his ups and downs, and at times he struggled, but he's sort of the streaky type quarterback that gets very hot, and Stills has enjoyed life with Jarvis Landry out there. And that's something you have to take into account, because obviously if he comes here, he's not going to have that type of complimentary piece, and all of a sudden he's going to be looked like as the guy, and that's a different role for him.
Talk with John McMullen. A lot of NFL news and notes as we get closer to the Super Bowl here. That report was from Elliott Shore-Parks over at NJ Advanced Media, suggesting that the Eagles will make a run for Jarvis Landry, Kenny Stills, if in fact he hits the market here. There's a lot of other things too, and one thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, John, is Jason Lockenfora reporting the 49ers remaining high on Kirk Cousins. We all think it's a foregone conclusion that the Redskins are going to use the franchise tag, but now you got Shanahan, who was in Washington. Does the Cousins to 49ers thing raise your eyebrows at all?
No, it doesn't. Bruce Allen has already said flat out, if we have to, we're going to put the franchise tag on Kirk Cousins. So I think that should end the discussion. I don't know why people keep reporting that. He's been – and there was no hemming and hawing. He said, we're going to put the franchise tag on Kirk Cousins. Now, there's no question that the Redskins would prefer to work out a long-term deal because they don't want to pay him $24 million. And I think they will work out a long-term deal. The only part of that where it gets a little bit hairy is if Cousins gets upset and doesn't want to play under another one-year deal, but he's shown no indication from his standpoint. He's talked and said, hey, look, he bet on himself last season. It worked out. If he has to do it again, he'll do it again. And having $20 million in the bank, which is what he made last season, 19.9, makes it a lot easier to sit there and say, I'm going to sign a one-year deal for $24 million. So I think nothing's 100% in this world, but I think it's 99.5% that Kirk Cousins remains as the Redskins starting quarterback.
John, Jason La Canfora also reporting that the Bills have significant interest in Tony Romo. Can you see Tony Romo in Buffalo?
Interesting.
Yeah, I could see Tony basically in any city that needs a starting caliber quarterback because he's going to be the best one available. And there's obviously age concerns, there's injury concerns, but if you're a team like Denver that feels they're on the cusp of making another Super Bowl run, it makes a lot of sense. If you're a team like Houston and you can figure out the Brock Osweiler nonsense, it makes a lot of sense. And if you're a team like Buffalo that hasn't had the answer at that position for so many years, it makes a lot of sense. But I think Jerry Jones and Tony Romo, and Jerry specifically, has said he's going to try to work something out for both sides. And I think Buffalo would be down on the list for Tony Romo. But if nothing else works out, he's going to be a starting quarterback somewhere in this league next year. And there's only a finite number of options.
Well,
if you can't work something out in a better situation, then sure, it's a possibility.
So what's a better possibility? Romo in Buffalo or Denver or maybe Arizona or somewhere, or broadcast booth?
I think the best opportunity is Denver. I really do, because I think they understand how close they are to winning a Super Bowl. John Elway's done a lot of fidgeting. Obviously, they have a new head coach because of the health issues for Gary Kubiak. Wade Phillips is gone, but they still have all that talent on defense. They know, no matter what they say, that Trevor Siemian's not the answer, and they know Paxton Lynch isn't ready. So do you want to go through another season of having a Super Bowl caliber defense and not taking advantage of it? I don't think he wants to do that. And by the way, he tried like heck to get quarterbacks last offseason, but wasn't able to accomplish it. So I don't think he wants that to happen again. So I still look at Denver as the most probable option.
John McMullen with us, our Eagles NFL insider and NFL columnist for FanRagSports.com. We'll stick with the quarterback position, John, and ask you about one more guy. As Jason La Canfora also reporting the Bears will be moving on from Jay Cutler, but will any team move in on Cutler? Where do you see Jay Cutler in 2017?
You know, I think San Francisco makes a lot of sense with Jay Cutler because, I think it's pie in the sky to think they're going to get Kirk Cousins, and they're so desperate at that particular position. They obviously need somebody to take over their team, and Jay's the kind of guy who I call him the Jeff George of this generation. I mean, from his arm talent and that perspective, he's off the charts, but he's always had the sort of the $1 million arm, the 10-cent head reputation. But I'll tell you, when you get him on the practice field, coaches tend to think, oh, I can work with this guy. I can fix this guy. And I think it's a perfect situation because San Francisco is not going to be able to get the options they want. They need a starting quarterback, and he's a starting level quarterback in this league.
A couple more for John here. A lot of off-season news coming out today. Jason La Canfora seemed to be busy reporting that the Bears will make a strong, concerted effort to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo from the Patriots. We've also heard Cleveland's name involved. Do you think the Patriots are going to cash in on those 4 games or maybe really 2.5 games of Garoppolo? Right? He's the Scott Mitchell of our time.
Yeah, I think they are, and I think they're going to do it quickly because they don't want people seeing Jimmy Garoppolo for 16 games. And I do think somebody's going to trade probably a second-round pick for him, whether it be Cleveland or Chicago or somebody of that nature. And the Patriots will say, thank you very much, and move on and get another probably difference maker. And Brissett will take over as the backup quarterback. He's probably better anyway. And they will go on their business laughing and smiling all the way.
Very interesting to see what they get in return. I mean, there's some reports that Cleveland might be – did I read that they might give up that number 1 overall pick?
You might have read it, and I don't have a ton of respect for the Cleveland Browns. But if they do that, they should cease operations immediately.
Oh, man. Because they do have the 12th pick in the draft as well, that Philadelphia pick.
Yes,
you would think.
do.
I mean, even that seems a little high, don't you think?
Yeah.
Just
I would never in a world when you have 3 quarterbacks who are going to go in the top 10 with more easily in a bad quarterback year supposedly, but all 3 of them have significantly better skill sets than Jimmy Garoppolo. If you're going to trade, the number 1 overall pick would be absurd. Even number 12, when you have an opportunity to get one of those 3 guys in your program, that would just be a disaster. And it wouldn't be the first one for Cleveland.
By the way,
it would be the latest.
By the way, John, I promise we will talk about the Super Bowl game tomorrow. There's been so much news this week.
Yeah, there always is.
Holy
there
mackerel.
Always is. That's because agents start talking, and that's where you get the Kenny Stills. They want to start to create sort of a buzz for their particular players.
I mean, I like it. I mean, I like looking at the news and diving into it. But, man, we haven't had a chance to really break down this game. We'll do that on tomorrow's show and get John's pick, of course, at JF McMullen. Follow him on Twitter. Listen tomorrow in the 4 o'clock hour for John McMullen as he'll pick his Super Bowl champion here on the Sports Bash. Have a good night, my friend.
Hey, you too. Thanks, guys.